Are you in a small church, or maybe you're thinking about doing a church plant and you are trying to figure out how to get your worship team started? Well, that has been my life for the last 14 years, and I'd love to talk about it. Welcome to Blazing Guitars. So there are a lot of unique challenges that come with being in a small church or on a church plant. And the biggest of those challenges is probably the lack of people. So there are a couple things and areas that you can really be intentional in, and it can help offset kind of that lack of people problem. So the first one would be to pick songs that people know. So I remember when we were starting our second campus and I was the worship leader there, and nobody would sing any of the songs I was picking. And I was trying to pick songs that were really meaningful to me and that were in my style a little bit more. And what I would find is over and over again, people were just not singing the songs. And so what I ended up doing was going to our local Christian radio station's website and finding kind of their top songs that they're playing and picking a couple songs from that set and then including those in worship. And I think what that did was it just really allowed the congregation to have songs that they were familiar with. And then what I found that I could do is as they were more comfortable and would sing a little bit louder, I could start adding in some more songs, and as they got comfortable with those, then I could start moving away from those super popular ones that I wasn't a huge fan of. So that would be the first thing, is just find good songs. If your congregation isn't digging it, then be willing to make that change and be willing to pivot and do something simpler. Another just small thing to help people sing loud is if you tend to sing songs a little bit higher than you normally would, people tend to sing louder when songs are higher. So don't hesitate to shift a key up half a step, because that can really help the congregation sing louder and make it feel like people are more engaged and help the worship service feel a little bit more immersive. So the second thing I would suggest, and this one's a little bit more involved, but if you are a worship leader, then make sure that you have a good minimal viable band in your back pocket. And what I mean by this is, in business, there's this idea that when you put a new product out to market, you're looking for a standard that is the minimal viable product. So if you're doing a phone, for example, you want it to make sure that the phone can make phone calls, and anything else is extra. Everything else is bells and whistles and doesn't need to be part of the initial launch. And so taking that idea into worship leading, make sure that your smallest band is excellent and that you're starting with a good core. And if you take me, for example, I'm a guitar player and a singer, and my wife is a singer as well. So if the two of us can put on a worship set that's relatively clean and sounds decent and is not distracting, then everything else that we add on is just extra and bonus. But our minimal viable product is something that's good or decent. So if you can do that, maybe you're a singer and you have a piano player and you want to make sure that you guys are really, really solid before you start adding other people. And then that way you have a core to build up from. You don't want to start with nothing. You want to start with a core group of 2 or 3 people that really can jive well together and have a good base, and then start adding people on top of that. And that segues into our next point, and that is to make sure that you have a good, reasonable expectation of what excellence looks like for you. So I think there's this idea, especially among worship leaders, that excellence is the goal, and you want to be as excellent as you can be. And if I could tweak that a little bit, especially looking at a small church or a church plant, I think what's more important is to be as excellent as you can be. So maybe you're not the best guitar player in the world, but you're the only guitarist in the church, which can happen a lot. What I would encourage you to do is to make sure that you're the best guitar player that you can be. It doesn't have to be excellent, it doesn't have to be amazing, it doesn't have to blow anybody's socks off, but put in the time and effort to be good and to be consistent and to not be distracting. And then what that does is that frees you up, and you're not worried about trying to hit the standard that is just not possible for maybe where you're at. And then the other thing is, and I've really tried to encourage our band in this, is try to be a little bit more excellent than the week before. So maybe you had a huge crash last week, and that happens all the time. But, maybe there's some things that you could tweak, and maybe one area that you could really work on this week that would help you not have that huge crash next week. So just take those ideas and give yourself a lot of freedom and a lot of grace as you're working through. Another revelation for me as I was trying to lead worship in a small church is to try and include the youth as much as I can. So our limit is 12 years old, so we don't allow anybody in that's younger than 12. But once they're 12, especially if they're musicians, what I found is that they'll practice all the time. They take input really, really well, and it gives them a really good and viable spot for them to serve in the church. So if you could grab those 12-year-olds or those young kids that are in your church and start training them up as musicians, by the time they're 16, 17, 18, they're doing super, super well. So our band has a couple 16, 17-year-olds that have been playing with us for a couple years now, and those guys are solid, and they're great piano players and guitar players, and they do really, really well. If you can tap those younger kids and start bringing them up and training them, and if you can take the time and effort to engage and invest there a little bit, that is an investment that will be well worth your time 4 years down the road. It might be a little bit rough at first, but especially if you can put in that time, it'll really have a high payoff. And then the final thing would be to try and set up a system where you have some scheduled breaks. So the way we do it in our church is my younger brother is learning how to sing and lead worship. So what I do is have him play once every other month, and then me and my wife will do an acoustic set once every other month. So when my brother plays, me and my wife are off, and then when we play, everybody else is off. So what that does is it gives a cycle of everybody having time off once every 8 weeks. At times we've done once a month where we have an acoustic set and everybody can take some time off, but try and set up a system. And I know that it's not possible in every single scenario, but make sure that you try to set up these guards against burning yourself out. And a big part of that is making sure that you're having consistent quiet times and getting spiritually fed and taking time to worship outside of Sunday morning. So just be really, really intentional to proactively fight against burnout, because it does come. And we've had times in our church where somebody's been serving for a decade and they just are not thriving at all, and it's just gone on and it's been this really, really horrible situation. So make sure that you're setting up boundaries for yourself and safeguards to really help you succeed, and that won't take you out. And I know that sounds hard, especially if you're the only person in church that can do it. So maybe try and talk with your pastor and see if there's like a prayer meeting that you can do once a month instead of worship. Or, try to set up these things and get creative with it. Worship does not have to be 30 minutes of songs on a Sunday. There's all kinds of ways that we can worship God. So get creative with it and try and figure out ways to set up those boundaries and those safeguards for you so that you don't burn out, because that's the biggest concern. So there you have it. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to do probably a couple more videos on this because this is really close to my heart. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below. If you want some camaraderie and to bounce ideas off of other worship leaders, feel free to jump in my Discord. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next week.